I'll answer the question everybody wants to know first. There are no live birds tonight. I'm sorry. The only way they could be here is if they stayed in their boxes, and our transport boxes are not see-through. So it'd be like Schrodinger's cat. Did she bring a bird? Did she not bring a bird? Who knows? So as Daryl gave a wonderful introduction, my name is Dani. I am a licensed falconer. I'm coming up on my 8th year as a falconer in the United States. I'm an educator here at Beacon College. I'm a hunter, first and foremost. I'm a conservationist, and I'm an anthrozoologist. And anthrozoology, for those of you that have never heard of a very strange long word like that, is the study of human-animal interactions. And that's exactly what this relationship is that we have with birds. So what is falconry? The sport of kings is what it's commonly called. Everybody, when you first hear falconry, and if you have ever seen it, you think of the Renaissance fair, king on the horse with the bird, right? It's an art form. It's a beautiful connection with a wild animal. It's a community of falconers. Just in those pictures there, you can see we have, let's see, nope, never mind. We have a variety of pictures going back all the way to the Middle Ages. There is that relief in the center. We have a falconer from Korea, Dong-Suk-woo, on the right. We have a falconer from Oklahoma on the left. We have falconers from the 50s and 60s up above. We have 2 years ago in Lone Wolf, Oklahoma, is the group picture down below, and we have a falconer from Mexico, who is one of the prominent falconers down there. It's this beautiful community, this blending of traditions and culture that comes all together. It's an intangible cultural heritage recognized by UNESCO as something that's an intrinsic right of people through their history. It's timeless. Quite literally, it's been around as long as we can find out. And it's tradition. But technically, the definition of falconry is the taking of wild quarry in its natural state and habitat by means of a trained raptor. Falconry is hunting, first and foremost. It's not rehabilitation, it's not education, it's not getting your letter from Hogwarts. It's not that really cute pet owl on TikTok. It's hunting with a bird of prey.
One thing that makes falconry impressive is that its history is so long. It's been around for thousands of years.
A bond formed within an Indiana family at an early age. That bond fostered by the art of falconry.
She just said, like, Caroline, these birds, this guy has these birds and he hunts with them.
The beauty of the sport is the participation in something that's totally natural.
Following in the footsteps of their master falconer Greg Thomas, sister Stephanie and Carolyn Thompson started learning falconry when they were 13 and 15 years old.
You have to jump through several hoops. You have to take a test. You have to get your equipment inspected. You have to have a mentor that has been so many years in falconry.
As part of the North American Falconer Association's National Field Meet, the Thompsons took their hunt to the plains of West Texas.
You just have such respect for both the prey and the predator because you see that it doesn't always get it. And you are able to see how the nature works.
If there aren't enough things to dislike about the West Texas wind, is it makes it extremely difficult for these hawks to hunt. Did they get it?
No, he didn't get it. He just got swept away with the wind.
Falcons, hawks, golden eagles. Instead of hunting with their owners, these birds always free to fly away.
You throw the bird up and usually they'll just turn right around and look at you and then you're just like, this is amazing, why aren't you flying away?
Tori Larned, KMAC News.
So when I show that clip, I always like to point out when they say falcons, hawks, golden eagles, that first bird was not a falcon, that's a red-tailed hawk. But that's just one example. So the Thompson girls are amazing. They're just starting college this year, which is super exciting. But this is a tradition that's been passed down in their family as well. And it's practiced all over the world, not just in the plains of Texas. It's practiced in Mongolia. Some people may have seen the PBS special with the Mongolian eagle falconer. Yeah? Super, super fun. It's also practiced in the woods, which is primarily where I practice. I am what's known as a squirrel hawker, which, as you guessed, means I hunt squirrels with my bird. And that means I spend a lot of time in the woods. But when did falconry start? So the earliest proof, or proof that we have of falconry comes from 3000 BC, when we found a pottery shard that features a falconer with his quarry and his bird. Apparently he did pretty well, he's got 2 rabbits there. So, then in 400 BC, Aristotle writes about falconry, talking about the boys that call the birds from the sky by name and hunt with them. About 600 to 700 AD, falconry in China is organized, sanctioned, and approved by the state. They start making rules and laws for it. The golden age of falconry happens under King Frederick II, 1100 to 1400s, and now it's an intangible cultural heritage practiced in over 100 countries. There are over 120 countries around the world today. It's something that transcends borders, people, time. There you go. But how does it tie into conservation? You're sitting here thinking, well, hunting's fun and all, or maybe you're like, hunting's not fun. But how does it tie into conservation? Well, throughout history, falconers have been tied to conservation. They were some of the first conservationists. We have Eleanor's falcon, which was the first legal protection of nests. The peregrine falcon, some of y'all might be old enough to remember the days of DDT and running behind the bug truck in neighborhoods. DDT almost had the peregrine falcon going extinct from pesticides, causing their eggshells to become too thin for them to sit on and hatch. The California condor is an ongoing effort. It started in the 80s. And the lugger falcon, which is one of the more recent global efforts for conservation. So who is Eleanor and why do we care about her, right? So Eleonora of Arborea was a judge on the island of Sardinia in Italy. And in the late 1300s, she started the first legal protections that we have in recorded history for falcons, protecting falcon nests from illegal poachers. And because of that, 500 years later, she was honored by having a falcon, Eleanor's falcon, named after her. After that, we have the Peregrine Fund. So a falconer, Dr. Tom Cade, started the Peregrine Fund as part of a response to the death of peregrine falcons in the United States. By the mid-1960s, it was virtually gone from the East Coast in the United States and most of the West as well. Peregrine falcon numbers were declining massively. And as the scientists were sitting around studying it, trying to figure out how to legally protect them, a group of falconers got together and went, I bet we can make some. And so they started taking peregrine falcons and breeding them in captivity and releasing them in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Made a huge international effort. And the Peregrine Fund itself, which still remains today, released over 4,000 peregrines before they were delisted. I'm really bad at numbers, so I need to check. In 1999. That's a lot of birds. And what we found through working with these peregrine falcons is that they only like to have babies in captivity if they really, really like where they're at. Otherwise, they're too stressed. And so falconers were able to work on refining and making breeding chambers easier and better to where now peregrine falcons are so plentiful, they're kind of annoying sometimes when you're looking for other birds, which is a great problem to have. Then we have the California condors. In the 1980s, there were 22 California condors left in the wild. That's it. That's kind of terrifying. Usually that means they're done, that's it, good luck to you, right? Now what happened was we found out through testing is most of them were dying from lead poisoning. We had DDT poisoning with the peregrines, now we have lead poisoning with the California condors. And so the Peregrine Fund said, hey, we don't want to just save peregrines, let's work on these condors. And so falconers like Doug Pinio helped build the first California condor breeding barns. Turns out California condors are not like peregrines, and they just want a lot of extra space and to be hanging out with a lot of other condors to have babies. And it takes them a lot longer to have babies as well. So people like Doug Pinio and others built these barns. Now it says nail dog up there because that was Doug Pinio's nickname. See, when they were building the barns in the 1980s, they did not have a lot of equipment. These were just like 6 guys and their wives trying to build a barn together. And while he was up on a scaffold on top of another scaffold, very, very safe, trying to nail in something on the roof with a nail gun, he somehow was leaning this way and managed to nail himself in the knee. And he said, ow, finished what he was doing, and then they went to the hospital. So if you go to the Peregrine Fund, oh, there we go, hello. If we go to the Peregrine Fund in Boise, Idaho these days, there's an entire artwork design on the wall with Doug Pinio's X-ray with the California condors. Now, the California condors is an ongoing program. The Peregrine Fund maintains a free-flying colony of condors in the Grand Canyon of over 100 individuals, but lead poisoning is still a problem today. Last year, 87% of the birds, when they tested them, had lead in their system. And these are birds that were raised in captivity, so they were a clean slate when they got released. So that's ongoing conservation that they're working on. They had their first release in 1996, and every September at the Vermilion Cliffs, they release however many California condors are ready to be released that year. Then we have Project Lugger. Has anybody heard of a lugger falcon? Probably not. They're not native to the United States. There are conservationists and falconers in conservation all over the world. This project is based out of the UK, and it focuses on the lugger falcon, which is primarily found in the Far East and in Asia. They're working on stopping the decline. So about 5 years ago, 2017, a bunch of falconers noticed, hey, we're trying to find some lugger falcons, we can't find any. Where'd they go? So they started studying it, and they found that there were massive electrocution deaths. They were being trapped as bait birds for other animals. They were still dying from DDT, apparently it's still being sprayed elsewhere. And they habitat loss. So they're losing their quarry and their habitat. And so they're not endangered yet, but they are rapidly declining. There was over 20,000 that died in the last 2 years. And so this is a brand new project that's still working. So conservation is continuing even today and around the world. Not always with lots of funding, but with a lot of heart, because these are people that love birds of prey. And it's not just birds of prey that they work with. They go out and they do education. That board up there is a list of every single person who put hands-on work into building the peregrine breeding chambers. And on the left is the Lugger Falcon Education Outreach event in Pakistan. And you might be wondering, why would hunters care about nature, care about conservation? Some of you already know, you might know, but why would someone who's taking this wild bird out of the wild to use her for hunting care about conservation? Well, the fact is, as Christy Stout very adeptly put it, he takes her hunting to keep her wild. Her wings are beautifully intact and reflect the light. She is fierce. She's a huntress. She still belongs to the wild. When falconers take birds out of the wild, they don't take them to take the wild out of them. They take them to be part of the wild with them. These birds, when they're released to go out and hunt, can fly away. They're not attached to anything. There's no leash. There's no shock collar in the sky, right? These birds fly and choose to actively hunt with their falconer. Why? Well, mainly because we're good bird dogs, basically. If you've ever been hunting with bird dogs, the dog goes out, flushes the quarry, and then you shoot the bird, right? Same concept, but instead of you shooting the bird, you're the dog. Your job is to flush the quarry for the falcon or the hawk to come and catch it. And as a wild animal, they care about 3 things: food, water, and shelter. And if you provide all 3 of those things, and they are safe, they'll be your hunting partner until the end of their days. And when you're out in the woods, in the fields, in the mountains, you tend to learn about them. As your bird is flying above you, you're watching how that squirrel, that bunny, that duck is moving, what its natural behaviors are when it encounters a predator, how wily and spry they are. When you're shaking that vine, you're learning what's poison ivy and what's not real quick. You're learning about what trees the animals live in, which ones they don't, where is appropriate to go hunting and where is just going to be a waste of time. You learn a lot about nature by simply being in it 3 to 7 days a week. During the hunting season, every day. I come back from lunch break with twigs in my hair. And you learn a lot about your hunting partner. Obviously, this is Florida, right? No, this is Alabama. But as you're going through the woods, as you're exploring, you learn to love nature, everything about it. Even when you're falling over stumps and trees and getting sticks in your eye, you get to spend time learning all about it. Is this repeating? No. You get hunts like this, where the squirrel masterfully gets away from the bird, falls what should be to its death, magically survives and gets snagged anyways in a really cool shot like that. By the way, fun fact, squirrels are the only animal on the planet that can survive terminal velocity. That's not made up, they really can. They're also zombies, they come back to life like crazy. But falconry is a community of conservation. We're spending these days out and about in the woods, in the fields, in the mountains, and we're spending it with family. We're going out with other hunters. We're learning to meet other people that love the same things that we love, that have the same passion that makes them go out when it's snowing, when it's raining, when you're just so darn tired you don't want to go out anymore. You still go because it's better for the birds. In this picture, sorry guys over there, I didn't know there was 2 screens. In this picture in the middle, which looks like a bunch of kids, because it is, this is a falconer from Namibia. He's from Sweden. He's from Arizona, which can feel like another country. There I am. This is a Mongolian falconer. This is in Abu Dhabi. This is a kid from Oklahoma who found a snake while we were hunting and picked it up. Don't worry, he's okay. It's tradition like this where an older falconer is teaching a younger falconer how to backpack a bird, which is a way of tracking them so you can tell how fast they are, how far they are. This picture in a tent is in Abu Dhabi, and this is a falconer from Norway teaching falconers from about 100 other countries about how to care for a goshawk who has aspergillosis. Because when you're working with these birds, you don't just pick up a bird and start flying. You learn how to take care of them. You learn their common illnesses. You learn what happens if you throw a bunch of pine needles in their transport box. Fun fact, it's really good for them. You learn all about these birds. You learn about the environments they live in, and you learn about what makes them tick. But you also learn about the prey, the quarry that you're chasing. You learn about where they live, what they do, why you should look over here and not over there. Things like that. You have all ages in falconry, as you can see, and it comes year to year. These pictures are 2 years apart, same friend group, meeting every year to fly birds together from all over the country. There's some really cool resources. If you want them, take a picture if you'd like. So, the Archives of Falconry is a museum dedicated solely to the history of falconry. It used to be the American Archives of Falconry, and then they said, well, we're not thinking big enough, right? If you want to know more about the timeline of falconry, you can slide it left and right and find out what we know about falconry during that time frame. The Peregrine Fund, conservationists to today. Also in Boise, Idaho. They share a parking lot actually with the archives. It's kind of fun. Visit both. They talk about conservation efforts all around the world. They're working in Costa Rica, in Puerto Rico with the sharp-shinned hawk, which is down to 14 nesting pairs right now because of a hurricane. On the whole island, 14 nesting pairs. Kind of terrifying when you think about it. but it's also a bird that's about this big, so it's kind of hard to tell. They're working with the Aplomado falcon, which is another amazing conservation success story in the Southwest. They're working with bat falcons, which, believe it or not, do kind of look like Batman. We got a black mask like that. And then there's the North American Falconers Association, which, as you saw in the video, they have this meet every single year. It's in Kearney, Nebraska this year. I don't know if Kearney's a destination for anyone else, but for hunters, it's great. Where falconers from around the world gather to share in this love that they have for nature. Falconry isn't just hunting. That's the definition, right? But when you catch the passion, the obsession with falconry, conservation comes naturally to you because you're spending up to 7 days a week, minimum of 3. You really shouldn't leave your bird for longer than that. And when you're spending it in the fields and the mountains, in the woods, wherever you are, maybe in the swamps. I don't know if we can catch some iguanas down south, but it might be fun to try, right? There's no way to not become a conservationist when you spend that much time in nature. Because falconry isn't about taming the wild. It's about experiencing and becoming part of the wild. Whew. I really sped through that. That took an hour when I said it earlier. So yeah, falconry is conservation, plain and simple. Conservation is falconry. Sorry. What questions do you have? Yes?
Why do you hunt squirrel?
I hunt squirrel because in Alabama, that's what's most plentiful. In falconry, the one thing that you really need to do is get the bird that's most appropriate for the quarry that you have. It would make no sense for me to get a golden eagle in Alabama because they take about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile to really get up to speed because they're so big. But if I'm hunting in the woods, they can't even stretch out their arms without hitting a tree, right? So in Alabama, where I primarily hunt, it's squirrels. Now, I don't eat the squirrels. Some people do. Most of the time with falconers, almost every falconer I know, the food that the animal catches, the bird eats. So these are our athletes. They need to be in their tip-top shape in order to catch the quarry they're chasing. Like you saw in that video, that bird missed the squirrel most of the time. Same thing with the jackrabbits in Texas. You'll miss them 8 times out of 10, unless you have a really phenomenal bird that's been doing it for a couple of years. So you chase what you have the quarry for, or you get the bird for the quarry. Yeah.
Will you come to my house?
Yes.
Both male and female falcons hunt?
Yes, both male and female falcons hunt. I will say traditionally, in going back even to medieval times, falcon means female, tiercel means male. So it's one of the few sports where women are the champion. Mostly because female birds are usually larger than the male birds, so they can catch bigger quarry, and it's kind of a size game. So.
All right.
Yep.
You've spoken quite a bit about famous falconers.
Yes.
Do you know any famous falcons in the sport of falconry?
Yeah, so there are a couple of falcons and hawks that are very famous. We have a red-tailed hawk named Pip, who is 32 years old. Oldest living red-tailed hawk that we know of in captivity. She has been partnered with a falconer named Chris Yankson up in, I think it's Michigan or Indiana, for that entire time. She was Chris's first bird, and they've been partnered ever since. So that's a famous one. We have a falcon who is a purlin, which is a hybrid between a peregrine and a merlin falcon, named Stinger out of Oklahoma, who is known as the best little bird falcon in the US right now. Really amazing to see. And I want to say probably not a falcon or a hawk, but Miles the golden eagle is flown by Lauren McGow out of Oklahoma, and she's probably the one everybody's seen on the 60 Minutes special, the gal that went to Mongolia. So, and she's actually in one of these pictures here. Yeah, so the lady in the lobby, that's in a hotel lobby, just hanging out with our birds in the hotel lobby between hunts. And that's Miles the golden eagle, who's pretty well known as well.
You said that this is a conservation effort, but since you've got people from all over the world with these birds, do you also have competitions?
So back in the Middle Ages and there were absolutely hunting competitions who could bring back the most, the biggest with their bird. Nowadays, we do not have competitions. It's illegal for us to make money off of our birds on a federal level with a falconry license. We do have what's known as the Sky Trials in Utah, which is which bird can go up the highest and then chase down a homing pigeon. They almost never catch the homing pigeon. But it's really, really cool because you get birds that go up to over 4,000 feet in the air. And so that's more just bragging rights. So,
I have a couple of questions, but is it okay if I ask?
go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, do we know how the condors are getting the lead poisoning, like where that's coming from?
Yes, so gun hunters sometimes use lead ammo. That was the most prominent ammo used previously. There's been a push for non-lead ammo in the last decade. However, a lot of hunters don't want to pay more money for bullets because non-lead ammo costs more. And so when they end up going out hunting, they field dress their animal and they leave the gut pile in the field. And because California condors are scavengers, they come down and they eat the gut pile that has lead in it.
Okay. How did you originally get into falconry?
So I grew up in Germany. I moved to the US when I was 16. And when I was in Germany, a little bit of a roundabout story, we did rodeo. We competed in European rodeo. And one of the other cowboys that was close with my family was a falconer. And we came over for dinner one time. And he said, "Do you want to see my birds?" And I was about 8 years old at the time. And I was like, "Sure," thinking he had like parrots. And we get out there and it's a great horned owl that's the size of me. And that was terrifying. But he also had falcons and he had a barn owl, a pair of barn owls that he was breeding for education programs. And I said, "Can I hold the owl?" Owls are not falconry birds, but this is the gateway drug. And he said, "Well, you know, I don't want you to get hurt or whatever." And he had this like breeding shed where he was breeding mice to feed the birds. And I was in desperation, like, "I'll kill the mice, I'll clean the storage facility, whatever it takes, just let me hold a bird." And I followed him around like a puppy for like 2 weeks, and he finally let me hold a bird. And I was hooked. The first time I held a bird on the glove, I was like, "I want to do this. I want to do this forever." And I moved to the US. Google is not the powerhouse that it is today. So I Googled where to buy falcon, and Google said, "It's illegal." And I went, "Well, that makes sense." Okay. And then when I got to college, I found out, well, yeah, it's illegal to buy a falcon unless you're a falconer. So I was like, how do I become a falconer in the United States? And I went through my apprenticeship then and after college, and that's how I became a falconer. So.
What is the expected lifespan for a falcon, and then what does their nesting area or where they live with you at home when they're not hunting look like?
Excellent story. I'm going to do this so you guys can all hear me. So in the wild, I'll use red-tailed hawks as an example. They're the #1 bird used in falconry. It's also the bird that most apprentice falconers are expected to work with. Red-tailed hawks in the wild have a 90% mortality rate in their first year. 1 out of 10 will survive in the wild. So as falconers, we're considered a non-impact sport because, well, it was gonna die anyways. and it doesn't with us. So like I said, Pip is the oldest one we know of, 32 years old. Most birds stay with their falconer anywhere from 2 years to about 15 years. So, and there was a study done 12 years ago now, that falconry birds, because they have that first full year with the falconer, they get food, medical care, shelter. Even if they don't catch something, they get fed. They never go hungry in that first year, so they develop stronger, faster, and they're more muscled because they get those rest breaks and they're not constantly stressed. They actually survive better when they are released back to the wild. Part of that would make more sense, as falconers, we can only capture birds in their first year. We cannot capture adult birds. Sorry, yes, the nesting in the home, thank you. So we have what's called a mews, M-E-W-S, not a kitten jargon. It's basically a shed in our backyards that is a minimum of 8 foot by 8 foot. Most of the time we do 10 by 10s, where it is a facility that is just where the bird lives. It has perches in it, it has gravel or grass or astroturf on the bottom. It's very similar to what you see in zoos, but we have barred windows instead of screened because we don't want anybody breaking feathers because then they can't hunt. Then we also have what's called a weathering yard, which are usually attached to the mews, where they go in and out and they have outdoor area as well. Usually those are fairly large, so they can fly around and keep up their muscles. We have facilities inspected by the feds and the state level when you first get licensed, and then random inspections after that.
You said that a falconer needs to be with his bird or her bird at least within 3 days. How much time do you spend with a bird, would you say, on average for a week? And the second part of the question is, when you take them out, how much time do you spend with them out in the field?
Okay, so yeah, the every 3 days was you should be flying your bird and hunting with them at least every 3 days is good ethical keeping of them. You spend time with your bird every single day. You have to feed them every day. They have a very fast metabolism. If you don't feed them every day, their metabolism crashes and they can die. So every day you spend time with your bird, at least 10 minutes it takes to give them food. But as far as hunting goes, when you take them out and you go out hunting and flying with them, it can be anything from 30 minutes once you get to the field, depending on how far you have to drive, to 4 hours, depending on if the bird wants to keep hunting. Because once you let that bird go, it is up to the bird now when they decide to come back. So I like to go hunting at lunchtime. When I was at my old job, I would have to call my boss frequently and be like, hey, my lunch is going to be a little more than an hour. I'll work late, I promise. Because my bird wasn't done hunting yet. So it can take 4 hours, it can take 30 minutes. It depends on how good you are at putting game up for your bird to chase. So, but I'd say during the hunting season, every day.
Do most falconers just have one bird?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So most falconers have one bird. I think there's several that have two, especially if they fly Harris hawks. Harris hawks are really, really cool in that they're the only bird that hunts in groups as far as birds go. So they can hunt 3 birds at the same time because they'll work together. But most falconers have 1, maybe 2 birds, depending on how much free time they have and how tolerant their spouse is.
In your early pictures, California condor, and he's holding a bird that appears to be pretty small. It's a condor.
Oh, yes, neither of those are condors. Those are both gyrfalcons. So those birds are native mostly to Alaska and Canada. Those were just Doug's favorite birds to hunt with. He worked on the California condor program, but condors are not falconry birds because they're scavengers. So unless you're hunting roadkill, you're going to have a hard time. which does happen. I've had a red-tailed that was very interested in this disgusting desiccated possum and would not leave it alone. Like, we had to leave the field and go somewhere else because she just went right back to it every time.
Do any falcons hunt fish like an eagle?
So usually, generally, most often, no. We do have osprey, which you are all familiar with, I hope. They're right outside nesting above the sports stadium if you want to see them. There is one falconer in Florida who said, I bet I can hunt with an osprey. And he does, with a T-perch off the back of his golf cart. I'm not even making that up. He literally drives around with his an osprey on the back of his golf cart. And he comes in, grabs the fish, and comes right back to the golf cart. Yes.
How does the falconer get their first falcon to become a falconer in the first place? Where do you get one?
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of steps to becoming a falconer. You have to take a 100-question federal exam on their biology, behavior, and healthcare. You have to get at least 80 questions right, and if you get more than that wrong, you have to wait 2 months to retest. Depending on the state, mileage may vary, but always at least 80% correct. You have to find a falconer that's willing to sponsor you and teach you everything you need to know, because the test does not teach you everything you need to know, and how to make your equipment. We usually make our own equipment. So the hood that he has in his mouth there at the bottom, that's called a hood. Most falconers make their own or buy their own from another falconer. Everything from the glove to the anklets that bird has on, we usually make ourselves. It's something that's traditional, that's passed down. So you learn from your sponsor for a minimum of 2 years, and your sponsor is responsible for you during those 2 years. Your first bird, usually, generally, most often, is a red-tailed hawk. And the way you get it is you trap it out of the wild. So what we do is we have a cage known as a BC or a balchatri from the Middle East that is basically chicken wire over a solid base, and we have a bait animal on the inside with fishing line loops on the top. And you drive around until you see a red-tailed hawk that is in their first year. Red-tailed hawks do not have red tails in their first year, so that's how you know it's a baby. You toss your trap out and you drive about 100 yards away and hope that it's hungry. And then it comes down, tries to grab the bait, which it cannot reach because the bait is protected with the wire cage, but it gets snagged on the fishing line, and then you run up with a towel, throw it over it, and say, gotcha now. And then you start the process of training them to learn, or helping them to learn, that you are not a mean person. You are here with food, free food. And once they learn that you have free food, in about 10 minutes or 3 days, depending on how stubborn they are, they're like, oh, if I come to you, I get food. So you get them you get them leaning towards you, and then hopping towards you, and then flying towards you. And then you go out and you hunt, and you pray your bird comes back and learn that you are where food comes from. Most of the time they get it. But that's where you get your first bird. After you've done your 2 years as an apprentice, you can be upgraded to a general falconer, and then you can buy a bird from a breeder, but they're very expensive. So most of the time people trap their birds.
Where do you hunt in Alabama, and what approximately is the hunting season? Which months?
Okay, I hunt anywhere they let me. Sorry. My family lives up in Alabama, and I know most of the falconers in Alabama. Alabama is also one of the only states that allows us to hunt in no-hunt zones in state parks, because we don't have guns or bows, so who are we harming, right? We also help keep the squirrel population down around the picnic areas, so they kind of like us for that. Hunting season, just like every other hunting sport, we do have one. Usually, at least in Alabama, it's September to March. We have extended season because you could kill a squirrel every single day and there would still be 1,000 squirrels. Yeah.
When you mentioned earlier about the condor, the California condor, what again was the connection between falconry and the condor? Was that just a lead-in to conservation?
No, so the first California condor breeding project, and the main one now at the Peregrine Fund, is run by falconers. So it was falconers that built the breeding barns, took in the last remaining individuals from the wild, and started breeding them in captivity.
What kind of relationship have you had with birds that you've worked with? Are some real friendly, affectionate, and what kind of breed is the most personable with a human being?
So these are wild animals. They don't like you. They tolerate you at best as long as you're a good provider of food. That said, when you get a captive bred bird, if it is imprinted on humans, it thinks it's a human, so it wants to be in your presence, but it still doesn't really want you to touch it that much. So the most personable bird I've worked with was a barn owl named Damascus. He's in an education facility up in Alabama. Again, owls are not falconry birds, but we get the privilege of helping with education birds and raising them because we are experienced. And so that was the most personable one because he would literally fly around my room at night, because I'm the crazy lady that lets them fly around the room at night, and he would come land on my chest and go to bed. Which sounds great until you realize they're 1,000,000 degrees and you now have feathers in your mouth. But they don't really snuggle, you don't pet them. It's just, especially most falconry birds, you are the hunting dog as far as they're concerned. As long as you keep producing quarry, they like you. If you mess up, they might hit you in the back of the head on a flyby. That's not an exaggeration. Lots of falconers have scars right here. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
I just wondered if you've read any C.J. Box novels.
I am really bad with names, but could you give me a title?
It's a series he writes about Joe Pickett, a game warden.
The name does sound familiar, so I probably did. I probably did as a teenager, but not recently.
And his daughter got into holding a bird with the falconer that was his best friend, so maybe you wrote about it.
The name does sound familiar. I'll have to look back. My Side of the Mountain was my favorite book as a kid. Surprise.
You mentioned that to own a falcon, one must have a falconer license. What agency issues those licenses, and what exactly is the process to obtain them?
So Fish and Wildlife is who issues those licenses. And as I was saying earlier, how you apprentice is you have to find a sponsor that's willing to basically take the blame for everything you do for your first 2 years in the falconry community. You build your facilities, you take the exam, and you get a federal and a state inspection. And you get your full license after 2 years if your sponsor signs off on it. So during those 2 years, you're doing everything a falconer would do. You're raising your bird, taking care of them, you're hunting with them, but you're learning along the way. It's really a trial by fire, and you better have a good guide. And most sponsors want you to hunt with them for at least a year before they're willing to sponsor you, because sponsors don't get paid for it. It's literally out of the goodness of their heart and desire to pass on the traditions. And it's a very small community. There's about 5,000 falconers in the United States. We all kind of know each other or know of each other, if you know what I mean. So when somebody's apprentice messes up, it doesn't matter if their sponsor's on Facebook or not, if their sponsor was there, their sponsor will hear about it, probably 5 times.
What is the purpose of the helmet, and how often do they wear it?
Okay, so that is called a hood. They wear it primarily when you are transporting them. It's a way of keeping them calm. If they cannot see danger, there is no danger. So if you're going out into the field and you have to cross somebody else's property to get to where you're supposed to be, or go over a barbed wire fence, or anything like that, you want to keep your bird calm and just sitting there waiting. So basically, it's a pause. It also can be used as a reset. So if you're hunting, they're not doing very well, you can tell your bird's getting frustrated. I had a red-tailed hawk that if she missed more than once, she would walk on the ground like a penguin and ask to be picked up. She'd literally be like, and I'd be like, no. And so you can put that hood on, wait a minute, take it back off. It's a whole new day, brand new reset. They do not wear them very often.
Just another question. Are they territorial? So if they see another competitor, will they fight with that competitor?
Some of them do. It depends on their personality. I had a red-tailed hawk 3 years ago now, who, if there was another red-tail within a square mile, she would go find it and kick its butt before we could hunt, which was terrifying the first 3 times or 4 times. And then after that, I was like, when you're done, I'm here. Like, because she was a bruiser. She wanted to fight everybody. But most times you're bringing a bird into a new territory, so they will not fight or they'll run away if somebody else has established a nest there.
And can you signal them to come back? If they're flying around, you raise your hand and they see that as a reason to come back?
So one of the things we do is we train them to come back with what's called a lure. Now, a lure can be anything, and I do mean anything. You can train them to come back to a Barbie doll if you want. But usually they're leather. We make them look like a rabbit or a bird or something, and it's on a long string, and we swing it so that they can see it, big motion, so no matter how far away, they can see where it is, and we blow a whistle. And when they come in, you drop the lure on the ground and they land on it, and they eat off of it. That's where a big meal is from. And so when you're training them, you teach them that no matter what's going on, no matter what we're doing, if I pull that lure out, that means jackpot, big meal. And so that's how you train them to come in to the lure.
So when you send them out to go after the prey, do they bring that back to you?
No, I wish it worked like that. That'd be a lot easier. You can, in the video I showed earlier of the squirrel hawking, you can see they just kind of land and wait. And it's your job to come in and dispatch the quarry so it's as painless as possible for the squirrel or the rabbit that they caught. Because nature is pretty rough, and a bird does not care if its quarry is dead before it starts to eat it. So your job is to go in and make sure that animal doesn't suffer any, as little as possible. So they land and they kind of wait for you to come up and assist.
Are the birds naturally solitary and they're okay with that? Or do you have issues where instead of hunting, they go looking for a mate?
So they are naturally solitary. Most birds do not like to share. Harris hawks being the exception to the rule because they hunt in family groups. However, if you have a female red-tail who's about 4 or 5 years old and you go hunting towards the tail end of spring, what is that? Oh, I should have known. If you have an older female red-tail, she will get hormonal if a male comes around, and she'll go over and be like, hello, are you gonna provide for me? And usually they're like, where did you come from? No. And then you get her back because she's like, well, they have food. But usually it's not that big of an issue, but we are very grateful to end in April or March so that we avoid that.
So you don't want a pregnant bird? Or
Well,
is that a money-making opportunity?
if you don't have a permit, it's a very felony opportunity. There is a special permit for breeding birds, so most falconers, it would be illegal for us to have a baby show up on our doorstep. However, most female birds will lay an egg anyways, it just won't be fertile, so it's not really a surprise, it's just part of it.
Spoke up, can you hear me?
Yes.
You spoke about, I don't know the word, getting enough quarry bird. How do you do that?
Well, that's part of where that love of nature and wanting to, well, you learn real fast what is good habitat and what's bad habitat for the quarry you're chasing. So what you do is you scout out fields beforehand without your bird and say, oh, I see 6 squirrels over here. Or, oh, I see rabbit tracks and rabbit poop. You're like, this is a good field. And so you have to do that prep work ahead of time, because if you bring your bird out and you are not putting up quarry, the bird loses trust in you as a hunting partner. And that's when you have a bird that's like, okay, peace out, thanks for the free food.
The elephant in the room. Does anybody know why the Atlantic Atlanta Falcons got their name, Atlanta Falcons? Do you know?
I do not.
Just quick paragraph search. Miss Julia Elliott, a local school teacher, submitted the name Falcons into a naming contest and reasoned that the falcon is a proud and dignified with great courage and fight. It never drops its prey. It is deadly and has a great sporting tradition. The city held a vote in the newspaper, and out of over 1,000 submitters, Elliott won.
That's awesome. I can vouch they absolutely dropped their prey.
Well, they're 2-1 right now. They did one.
You mentioned you were from, or you were in Boise for a while. We had the pleasure of going to the Raptor Museum up there.
Yes, that's the peregrine fund.
I saw a owl eagle, is that correct?
Eagle owl, yes.
Eagle owl?
Yes.
They said something about they're being bred in Florida. Do you know about that?
Yep, there are breeders for different birds all around you in the U.S., also here in Florida. Eagle owls would not surprise me. They are very popular for education programs. Somebody, I think, wanted to ask how much they cost earlier. A captive bred bird can cost anywhere from $400 to $45,000, depending on the type of bird. And it's very, very expensive because of legal reasons, like CITES and import permits and things like that. There are not a lot of new species of birds brought into the U.S. anymore. There used to be before, before everything got locked down about 40 years ago. So there's really not a lot of new genetics coming in from exotic species. So something like an ornate hawk eagle is going to run you about 45 grand. But something like a Harris hawk, which is native to Texas and Arizona and New Mexico, about $400.
Can you talk about that valley south of that Raptor Museum?
Yeah, so there is a, what is it called? There is the Morley-Nelson Conservation Area that has this beautiful valley with a little river running through it, which is one of the nesting sites for peregrine falcons as well as prairie falcons. Morley-Nelson was also a falconer that was one of the founding members of the Peregrine Fund. And he did so much for conservation that they named an entire national park area out there in Boise after him. It's really cool. It's on the Snake River. And they do a lot of research with the nesting pairs there. And so they trap and they band the birds and they keep point counts of them. So it's very, very cool.
Wondering how you exercise your birds outside of the hunting season?
Well, to make a long story short, we don't. So birds go through a molt every year where they drop all of their feathers. And if they are hunting and exercising during that time, they can damage the feathers as they're coming in, or they can have stunted growth of the new feathers. So basically, they get put up in their mews and weathering area for the summer. So we do get to relax a little bit during the summer. We basically toss them food every day and wish them the best of luck in growing their new colors. And then when it comes close to hunting season, we do what's called pulling them from the chamber, which really is the fancy word for, hey, we're gonna start getting our muscles back now. And you start doing different exercises with them, such as using a drone. We used to use balloons, but now we have drones, so we upgraded to the 21st century. And you take the lure and dangle it from a drone and fly up into the sky, and the bird has to chase the drone to get the lure. And that helps build up their muscles, going higher and higher and faster. You can also use pigeons, so we can use homing pigeons, which will blow the barn doors off of most birds, especially right out of the chamber. And so what they'll do is they'll put the bird up in the sky, and then they'll chuck a pigeon out, and the pigeon will go, pew, and be gone about like that. And the bird will be like, oh crap, food, and try and chase it down. And so that's another way you can develop muscle with your bird as they're coming out of the molt.
What about hunting on private property? Our golf course is full of squirrels.
Where's your golf course at?
It's 20 miles south of Ocala.
Okay.
So I'm just curious about We could really use you here.
So, I need numbers and names after the talk. Like I said, we cannot make money off of our birds, so you cannot pay us to do that. That said, we love hunting golf courses because the squirrels don't know what's that until like the third day you come, and then they all run. But that is allowed if we get permission, and we do ask permission. We can't just wander onto anybody's land and be like, oops, sorry, pardon me here. We do have to get permission to hunt on private property, but so long as there's no city ordinance against it, City of Leesburg, we can do that. The City of Leesburg has an ordinance that you cannot harass squirrels. I did not believe it. I moved here and I went, I gotta be reading that wrong. So yeah, City of Leesburg, you cannot.
Would they attack sandhill cranes?
No, those are way too big. I am not aware of any county statutes against it, and I don't want to. But yeah, if anybody wants me to come hunt your property, that would be amazing.
How big a property do you need this?
If I put my birds up, are your neighbors going to be looking up their tail? Then you're good.
All right, any other questions? One more? Okay.
Where I lived in California, I used to see the falconers over at the sanitation department and at the landfills, things. Do they do that here in Florida?
So they do. That is called abatement. So abatement, it uses falconry techniques and hawks and falcons to get paid to go and get rid of nuisance wildlife. And so that is one of the only cases, it's a very specific license, separate from a falconry license, where you can get paid to get rid of wildlife. And in California, it is actually very popular. I have a friend out there that does it for the Oscars anytime they're outdoors. Yeah. She and her Harris hawk will go and fly over the heads of celebrities and make sure no pigeons ruin their red carpet look. So yes, that is something that happens here as well, but it's not falconry.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Dani Mitchell.